I used to think the scariest thing about the gym was dropping a plate on my foot or tearing a rotator cuff. But then I found the Vault, a 24-hour basement facility where the membership was cheap and the air was always freezing. I thought the guy watching me from the corner was just an eccentric powerlifter. I was wrong. By the time I realized what he was actually training for, the doors were already locked from the outside. My name is William. I'm a high school history teacher, which means my life is mostly spent grading papers and drinking lukewarm coffee. I'm not a bodybuilder, but I like to stay in decent shape. When my local commercial gym hiked their prices by 40%, I went looking for a budget-friendly alternative. That's how I found Ironworks Athletics. It was located in the industrial district, tucked between a radiator repair shop and a defunct meatpacking plant. The sign was just a piece of plywood with the name spray-painted in black. The owner, a man named Silas, who looked like he hadn't seen the sun since the 90s, gave me a tour that lasted all of 30 seconds. The gym was in a basement. It smelled like rust, old rubber, and something else I couldn't quite place, something sweet and metallic. "We don't have fancy juice bars here," Silas told me, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "Just iron and sweat. You get a key card for the side door, 24 hours. Don't touch the equipment in the back room behind the plastic sheeting. That's for the private clients." I should have asked about the private clients. I should have asked why the plastic sheeting was thick, industrial-grade PVC that was duct taped to the floor. But the price was $50 a month, and I'm a sucker for a bargain. The first week was normal. I'd go in around 10 o'clock p.m. after I finished my lesson plans. Usually, I was alone. The fluorescent lights flickered and hummed, a constant electrical buzz that filled the silence. I'd put on my headphones, do my squats, and leave. It was on my 8th night that I met the spotter. I was on the bench press, trying to push a weight that was probably 5 pounds too heavy for my current strength level. I was on my 4th rep, and the bar started to stall. My arms were shaking. The bar began to dip toward my chest. I felt that sudden, cold spike of panic when you realize you're about to be pinned. Suddenly, the weight felt light. A pair of hands had gripped the bar from behind me. They weren't wearing workout gloves. The skin was incredibly pale, almost translucent, and the fingernails were yellowed and thick. "Drive it up," a voice whispered. It wasn't a supportive shout. It was a flat, dead command. I locked the bar out and racked it. I sat up quickly to thank whoever had helped me. Standing there was a man who must have been 6'5". He was wearing a gray hoodie with the hood pulled low and baggy sweatpants that looked like they were covered in dried mud. He didn't have a gym bag. He didn't even have water. "Thanks, man," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. I bit off more than I could chew there. The man didn't respond. He just stared at the plastic sheeting in the back of the gym. His eyes were wide and didn't seem to blink. After a few seconds, he turned and walked toward the leg press machine in the corner. A machine that I had never seen anyone use because it was bolted to the floor in a way that made it face a concrete wall. He sat down and started doing reps, but there was no weight on the machine. He was just pushing the empty sled back and forth, over and over, with terrifying speed. Clack, clack, clack. I finished my workout early that night. As I swiped my card to leave, I looked back. The man was still there, but he wasn't on the machine anymore. He was standing by the plastic sheeting, his ear pressed against it, listening. The next night, I told myself I was being paranoid. It's a basement gym in a bad part of town. You're bound to meet some weirdos. I went back at the same time. The man was there again. This time, he was standing right next to my usual squat rack. "You're William," he said. I froze. I hadn't told anyone my name except Silas, the owner. "Yeah? Do I know you?" "I've watched your form," he said. He stepped into the light. His face was gaunt, the skin stretched tight over his cheekbones. He looked like he was starving, yet his forearms were corded with thick, unnatural muscle. "You have good recovery, high oxygen capacity. You'd last a long time." "Look, I'm just here to lift," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I moved to a different rack across the room. I tried to focus on my workout, but I could feel his gaze. He wasn't working out anymore. He was just standing in the center of the room, turning slowly as I moved, keeping his eyes locked on me. I decided right then that I was going to cancel my membership. The next morning, I headed for the locker room to grab my bag. The locker room was a small, damp closet with 3 lockers and a single shower stall that always dripped. When I opened my locker, my heart dropped. My street shoes were gone. In their place was a small glass jar filled with a dark, viscous liquid. And taped to the inside of the locker door was a Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me, taken from behind, while I was sitting at my kitchen table in my apartment 3 nights ago. A cold sweat broke out across my neck. Someone had been at my home. Someone was in my home. I grabbed my bag and ran for the exit. I didn't care about the shoes. I just needed to get to my car. I burst out of the locker room and sprinted toward the side door. I reached the door and pushed the crash bar. It didn't budge. I pushed again, harder, throwing my shoulder into it. The door was chained from the outside. "Silas!" I yelled. "Hey, the door is stuck!" The gym was silent. The humming of the lights felt louder, vibrating in my teeth. I turned around, looking for the man in the gray hoodie. He was gone. Then, I heard a sound from behind the plastic sheeting. It was a wet, tearing noise, followed by a heavy thud. "William?" The voice didn't come from the man in the hoodie. It came from Silas, but it sounded wrong. It sounded like he was gargling water. "Silas, where are you?" I walked toward the back, my phone in my hand, ready to call the police. I had no bars. The basement was a dead zone. I reached the plastic sheeting. I noticed for the first time that the duct tape at the bottom had been peeled back. A trail of that same dark, viscous liquid from the jar in my locker led directly under the plastic. I should have run to the other corner and looked for a heavy weight to break the door. But curiosity is a poison. I reached out and pulled the edge of the plastic aside. The back room wasn't a private gym. It was a surgical theater. There were no weights. There were only stainless steel tables, rusted chains hanging from the ceiling, and a large industrial meat grinder. Silas was there. He was slumped in a chair, his throat opened with a precision that was terrifying. He wasn't the private client. He was the inventory. And standing over him was the man in the hoodie. He held a long, curved blade in one hand and a whetstone in the other. He wasn't looking at Silas. He was looking at the gap in the plastic where I was standing. "The workout is over," the man said. "Now we start the harvest." I dropped the plastic and bolted. I didn't go for the door. I knew it was locked. I ran for the heavy equipment, the only place I could hide. I scrambled behind a row of treadmills, my chest heaving, trying to keep my breathing silent. I heard the plastic sheeting rustle, then the slow, rhythmic sound of footsteps on the concrete. Tap, clack, tap, clack. He was wearing my shoes. "You can't leave yet, William," he called out, his voice echoing off the walls. "You've got so much potential. I hate to see good muscle go to waste. Did you know that the human thigh is the most calorie-dense part of the body? We're going to make sure you're put to good use." I looked around frantically. To my left was a rack of dumbbells. To my right, the dark corner of the locker room. I realized then that I wasn't just in a gym. I was in a pantry. I thought I was the only one in the gym, but as I crouched behind the treadmills, I looked at the security monitor mounted on the wall. The screen was split into 4 views. One showed me hiding. The other 3 showed the locker room, the back room, and the parking lot. In the parking lot, 3 more men in gray hoodies were unrolling a large tarp from the back of a van. This wasn't a lone psychopath. This was an operation. I pressed my back against the cold, greasy metal of the treadmill. My heart was hammering so hard against my ribs, I was certain the man, the spotter, could hear it over the hum of the fluorescent lights. I watched the security monitor with wide eyes. The men outside were efficient. They weren't rushing. They moved with the calm confidence of people who had done this a dozen times before. They knew the basement was soundproof. They knew the door was chained. The spotter's footsteps stopped. He was standing right on the other side of the row of treadmills. I could smell him now. He didn't smell like sweat. He smelled like ammonia and old copper. "I can hear your heart, William," he whispered. "It's a strong heart, good cardio. That's the first thing we'll take. The high-end clients pay a premium for organs from clean donors. No smoking, no drinking, just pure, oxygenated tissue. I looked at the dumbbell rack 3 feet away. The heaviest ones were on the bottom. If I could reach a 40-pounder, I might have a chance. But the moment I moved, heavy on me. I looked at the floor and saw a small, discarded spray bottle of industrial glass cleaner and a dirty rag. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed the bottle, aimed it through the gap in the treadmill base, and squeezed the trigger. A stream of blue chemicals sprayed directly into the spotter's eyes. He let out a sound that wasn't a scream, it was a low, guttural hiss, like a punctured tire. He stumbled back, clutching his face. "You little rat!" he spat. I didn't wait. I lunged for the dumbbell rack. My fingers gripped the cold steel handle of a 50-pound weight. I didn't try to lift it for a workout. I swung it with every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength I had left. I caught him right in the side of the knee. There was a sickening crack, the sound of a dry branch snapping. The spotter collapsed, his leg folding at an angle that shouldn't be possible. He dropped the curved blade, and it skittered across the concrete. I didn't stay to finish him. I heard the side door rattling. The men from the van were trying to get in. I scrambled toward the back of the gym, past the plastic sheeting. If the front door was blocked, I had to find another way out. The harvest room was even worse up close. Silas was slumped over, his eyes staring at nothing. I looked past the meat grinder and saw a small, rusted ventilation grate high up on the wall. It was too small for a man my size, but it was the only opening. Then I saw it. In the corner of the room, under a blood-stained tarp, was a heavy industrial freight elevator. It was an old manual one, the kind with the sliding metal gate. I ran to it and slammed the gate shut. I pulled the lever. Nothing happened. I looked at the power box on the wall. The master switch was flipped to off. Suddenly, the plastic sheeting was ripped away. The 3 men from the van were standing there. They weren't wearing workout gear. They were wearing rubber aprons and surgical masks. One of them held a heavy sledgehammer. "The boss is going to be very disappointed that you broke his favorite scout," the man in the middle said. His voice was muffled by the mask, but he sounded bored, like he was talking about a broken piece of equipment. I reached for the master switch, but it was 5 feet outside the elevator gate. I was trapped in a metal cage. "Wait," I gasped, my hands shaking on the bars. "I have money. I can get you more than Silas ever did." The man with the sledgehammer laughed. "We don't want your money, William. We want your protein." He stepped forward and swung the sledgehammer. It hit the metal gate with a deafening clang, bending the bars. He swung again. The gate was buckling. In one more hit, he'd be able to reach through and pull the manual release. I looked at the floor of the elevator. There was a heavy iron hook used for hanging carcasses. I grabbed it, waiting. As the man swung a third time, his arm followed through the gap in the bent bars. I didn't hesitate. I drove the iron hook into his forearm and pulled with everything I had. He screamed, his face hitting the bars. While the other 2 scrambled to help their partner, I reached through the gap, my fingers straining, and flipped the master switch on the wall. The elevator groaned. The old motor sparked, and the floor began to shudder. "See you in hell," I yelled as the elevator started its slow, agonizingly slow ascent. The men tried to pry the doors open, but the elevator was already moving past the floor level. I watched their angry, masked faces disappear as I rose toward the ceiling. The elevator didn't go to the street. It opened into the back of the meatpacking plant next door. The room was filled with hundreds of frozen cow carcasses hanging from hooks. It was a maze of cold, dead meat. I stepped out, my breath blooming in the freezing air. I ran through the rows of beef, looking for an exit. I finally saw a heavy steel door with an exit sign glowing red above it. I burst through the door and fell into the gravel parking lot. It was raining now. My car was parked 50 yards away. I fumbled for my keys, my hands so sore I could barely feel them. I got to the car, locked the doors, and peeled out of the lot, spraying gravel behind me. I didn't stop until I found a police cruiser sitting outside a 24-hour diner 3 miles away. When the police finally raided Ironworks Athletics, they found the basement empty. The equipment was there, the plastic sheeting was there, but Silas' body was gone. The spotter was gone. Even the blood had been scrubbed clean with professional-grade bleach. The lead detective sat me down in the station. "Mr. William, we checked the property records," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "That building hasn't been a gym in 10 years. The electricity was supposed to be cut off months ago. And as for Silas, the man who owned that place died in a hunting accident 3 years ago." I looked at the photo in the folder. It was Silas, but in the photo, he had a massive scar running from his ear to his collarbone, the same place where I had seen the spotter standing earlier that night. They never found the men in the van, but a week later, I found a small package on my doorstep. Inside was the jar of dark liquid from my locker and a new Polaroid. It was a picture of me sitting in the police station, taken through the window. On the back it said, "You're still the best specimen we've found. We'll wait for you to bulk up." I don't go to the gym anymore. I bought some rusty dumbbells for my garage, and I keep the door locked. But sometimes when I'm working out in the dark, I hear a faint clack, clack, clack from the street, and I know they're still counting my reps. William survived, but he's never truly free.